And I will share the screen. If any of the attendees need interpretation, you can go into the interpretation channel. Thank you all again so much for joining us.
Lama Karma Pa, Kingo Pingi Juni, Sisi Paguri, Nanjurma, Chile Pingi Jebo, Wangir Chigyon, Virgin Timberla, Nanjur Teji, Bigoju, Dame, Tuji, Kyora, Sanja Tom, Chigi, Locha, Dora, Jingi, Chilam, Dora, Jingi, Labdus. Lam Truva Zora Jingi Labdus, Truva Yeshe Chawara Jingi Labdus. Oh, Lasada, Samala, Nardo Delek, Shua the Chapjik, the Nekunung Chanchu Cho, the Tukiba Saltab Ne, Tambitious Sure.
To begin with, I offer you all best wishes for a good morning. And together with that, I request that you please listen to the teachings of the genuine Dharma with the perfectly pure motivation of bodhicitta, the awakening mind.
Tela gang sempre Chigirimba, Chigil Tabulaji Sung Sangi Surab Do Ma Samagi Judam Mingbo Tabu Tabu Chishi. Tabu Chishi Nane.
Of all the possible topics of the Dharma to which we could be listening, our topic is the teaching of the Dharma king Gampopa. That is the condensed essence, the very heart of all the teachings of the Buddha, of the sutras and tantras, known as the 4 Dharmas of Gampopa. And of these 4, we are working with the Dharma becoming the path.
Lam Tang Yana Kiputing the Tumong Lam Kaunung Jitingore 어디에다 기부 등세에 그래서 가상도 오 생기 가상 시사래 된다데 그러에 님이 통 그러래 돌에 타봐 방든데 톱저지 대규 라바섬다 주와 주비 기부디 기부 등래스라라 딜라지다 기부 등들라 생이 수숨도 그러라 님이 통 단적게 이 랑든도 랑이 타바툼 투벨라 드니르게 드니 디규 라바숨라 탈바투베디 라바숨 냠네제발라 라레바통 이 라바숨라 드니르게 라바숨 라 던드니르네 이 냠네제바 도르드나 코알레 단적게 탈바tum도게 탈베규 라바숨라 롬데 게바 롬데케네 로버제바 계시숨던데 뭐 기부되더니 기부 등다
The Dharma becoming the path is the presentation of what is called the intermediate degree of spiritual maturity, or alternatively, the path held in common with the intermediate degree of spiritual maturity. And we saw previously what the exemplar of that intermediate degree of spiritual maturity is. What is the example? That is an individual whose spiritual maturity is such that they have perceived the deficiencies of samsara in its entirety. They seek to be free of it by attaining liberation for their own sake, and understanding that the cause of doing so is the practice of the three trainings. They undertake that practice. This is the practitioner at the intermediate degree of spiritual maturity. And you can see that the defining characteristics have three principal points. First, seeing the deficiencies of samsara, the disadvantages of samsara, and wishing to be free of it in liberation. Second, the aim of attaining their own benefit in that liberation. And third, engaging in the practice of the three trainings, which is the cause of that liberation, through understanding that it is in dependence, in reliance on those three trainings, that the liberation is achieved. So in sum, this individual, called one of intermediate spiritual maturity, is one who makes efforts to practice the three trainings in order to attain liberation from samsara out of the urgent wish to be free of samsara altogether.
Hola, y de que je sumgi nangne ni que je donguni di gyulake sul kasangong de setara embassy sangi embassy sumbe korim da tamba 동al shebar jas de 동al she dele talwatan dinner tenne 이 talwadi kunjung pawala la base ni sangi kunjung pawala jas mo ni ba tenne kunjung pawlo ni ba she de kunjung pawlo ko ne 동al de ko den thorong ni ba she tiga서 되는 공부토고도 somebody talwadnyara so domchana ngejungrara
Mari.
디 any demba shi ki kurim dum badani tambo dungal she dungal kunjung la la ba shene kunjung pangja imba she any kunjung pangra cha so na shi kunjung pangro imba she ti pang ko ne any golden toron imba she ne to badun nyara di ibadu kasanga de she thar
These features of the intermediate degree of spiritual maturity are 3 in number, and I've previously explained the first 2 in the perspective of how they become active in the mind stream with reference to the 4 truths of realized beings. So the way that works, briefly stated, is that the individual of intermediate spiritual maturity follows the Buddha's imperatives, the instructions of the 4 truths. First, recognize suffering, and in particular, recognizing samsara in its entirety to be suffering, develops this urgent wish to be free of it. Understanding that in order to do that, it is necessary to eradicate the origin. The individual then follows the instructions of the second truth. Eradicate the origin or abandon the origin of this suffering. Understanding that by doing so, one is able to actualize the true cessation, which is the instruction of the third truth, is the urgent wish to seek liberation, which is also called renunciation or reorientation of the mind away from samsara and towards liberation. In this way, the practitioner follows the 4 truths of recognizing suffering, understanding that it is necessary to eliminate the origin of suffering, that is the object to be eliminated, in order to attain the true cessation of nirvana. And up to that point, we've already explained.
Allah. 델라다 시고에게 아니 계신분들이 그러려나 안도 그룹이 님이 신에 아니 코알라 그룹이 님이 시 코와 능을도 통내 델라 지라함 단적이 선바 지점기 숙처와요나 숙처와다 톱처와요나 대점기들이 털베 표현 통화당 표현 통화양 톱치 그래 인디 코와 능을도 시바디 tarbe dewa shegi gyure proba dungal de machine tarbe dewa machine mane ona penna dogo madona khala ge dogo proba mara khala shimbo yembadi dogo ga se to na dega se khala dowa di yago shegi dina shege kha ga de komna dega se chu ge dowa di yago shegi dina shi ko dungal du thong ani dushi de ga se shukcha ya na 대단히 target 대화디 모시기래. 뒤에다더니 그러게 동을 삼고 그래서야지 상기기더니 주작기에게 고바디 주작기에 찍고 말해. 탈방 모셔야지 그래. 지금 그러고 동을 통한 대등게 탈바 대화 통도 그래. 그러고 등을 드셔봐디 탈베 대화 시작이더니 제 왕보다 그래. 제 왕보면은 칼라기 로트르고 말아. 칼라기 로트르고 말아. 뒤에 지금 그러고 등을 드시면은 아니 탈바 대화 임바디 멋있고 말아. 뒤에 그러고 등을 드셔야지. 그러고 등을 임바시는 주작게디 하장게더니 냠닝이 내가 침부지를 해야 되다.
So what's important to understand here? What is essential in this description? It sounds very technical, but what's important here is actually really critical. To really understand the disadvantages of samsara, its defects, and to develop a wholesome fear of being stuck in that state, that wish to be free of samsara in its entirety. When this happens with incredible power and strength, there is a proportionate understanding in power and strength of the benefits and advantages of liberation. the two go hand in hand. Without seeing samsara in its entirety as unfulfilling, then the benefits, the bliss of liberation are not clear. So these two happen in equal proportion to one another. It's kind of like if there is delicious food laid in front of you, unless you're hungry, it doesn't really move you. But if you're very hungry, that delicious food moves you to act. So similarly, it's by understanding the complete lack of fulfillment of samsara, the suffering pervasive to samsara, that we're able to see the benefits of the Dharma that allows us to be free of it. And not only that, but to the extent that that understanding of the suffering character of samsara is powerful, to that same extent, we have a powerful understanding of the benefits of liberation and the genuine happiness, the bliss that goes with that. So it's not just that we see the deficiencies of samsara. It's not just this bleak sense of samsara being defective, but together with that, there's a understanding of the bliss of liberation that is equal in proportion to our understanding of the defects of samsara. So these two are equal in power. Our understanding of this, of the suffering of samsara, however strong that is, we have an equally strong understanding of the bliss of liberation. So that understanding of the bliss of liberation is like the taste faculty, the tongue taste faculty, which is able to actually taste the delicious food. It's the understanding of the sufferings of samsara that allows us to savor the bliss of liberation and be moved to engage in its attainment. By understanding the suffering of samsara, we are able to turn towards liberation. This is an absolutely crucial point of practice.
Mi xiao ye tun dong ne zhe ba da bu gu re song da be xian da xian na na zo garden na jiu mong wo yo lo garden de me gi sik song na garden de me ba song na tini jiu du so gar ji gre garden la zhe zhe ro garden la xian ba lo do ro 어디 철칙이 주도고 그랬습니다. 양나 손하라 장난과당 되서요라. 디 소리 공가 장목이 캬서나 캬바 차서나. 되니 디나래 여기기 장난과당 되서 그렇지 그래. 소라 레와 달도로. Tini Kroala Simbalova did go this. Talk with Chado. Tell Tibi Judo.
So how can we measure or gauge the intensity of this mindset that has a wholesome fear of samsara in its entirety, having seen that it is replete with suffering and the consequent wish to be free of it? We can get a sense of what that mindset is like by the example of birds regarding a burnt garden. Normally in a lush garden, there are many birds enjoying the landscape. But if the garden is completely seared and burnt, the birds don't have any interest in it. They completely reverse any attachment to the garden because it is completely dried up and burnt. Similarly, if we think of a mountain lake, there may be many swans that are swimming on the surface of the lake. They are enjoying it. But in the winter, when the lake becomes frozen and the ice is solid, the swans have no interest in it. They have no hopes for swimming on the surface of the lake. This is the kind of disinterest that's meant by reversing our reification, our fixated attachment to samsara.
Hola, tiene la simba tinelo, danda la simba tinelo go ese. Pede direra. La simba tinelo tarbe indent la tinni tendino gigira. Tikasu Tini tarba di ganis togure slavna tini nyomongbe korwegyu nyomongbe nyembo lam dambe chuegi nyamne jebala tini lam dambe chuegi nyamne jebe kone nyomong bapang tei topkis tegu dungal dam dalwe kogden togure din zang kogden di lamden la rale ba she todi gosu tini jitam gi tarbala dunir shukchimbo yoba tetam gi lamla dunir shukchimbo kedo kuni gyuregi dewa tonguro kongden tarbadi lamden la rala ba imbe delwadi hago sona tini jitam tarbala dunir shukchimbo yoba tetam gi lamla dunir shukchimbo kegre tin zang sangi chunen de gi shibadi lam temperja songro
So when we're referring to overturning our fixated attachment to samsara, what's necessary is a very deep-seated mindset, a very rooted mindset of overturning this attachment. It's a complete disinterest in samsara, which yields an equally deep-rooted urgency in seeking the excellent qualities of liberation. With that mindset that has a deep-rooted understanding of the value of liberation, then we ask, well, how do we attain that? What are the methods for attaining this liberation? And we can go through the cause of that yields that result of liberation. The cause of samsara in its entirety boils down to the kleshas, the emotions that disturb mind's natural tranquility. So the remedy for the kleshas is what we're seeking to be able to attain the result, liberation. This remedy is the genuine dharma. The path of the genuine dharma put into practice is what allows us to eradicate the kleshas and attain the result of being free of the kleshas altogether. That result is called the true cessation, which the Buddha describes in the third truth. And it is by understanding that attaining that true cessation, liberation, depends on the true path, that the urgent wish to practice that true path and attain liberation arises. So it is by recognizing the connection between the true cessation we seek, the liberation we seek, and its cause, the true path, that we develop the urgent wish to engage in the practice of the path of genuine dharma. This is as the Buddha instructs in the fourth truth of noble beings, rely on the true path.
Hola, tiene da lamla lamla dunir kewadi lamla dunir ke lamla toa kewadi tundira tel tene ne lam nyamnin la chudora lam nyamnin gi betul chedogre toa tel tene 다 디컵스 그래 용거리 람나 다 람라 드니르케디 람디 줍투 그래 말에 양 디양 두아라 디컵스 드니 줍투기 여바디 그래 랑라 람 두게기 갈긴 유콤베 네게 달 튕긴 저바추 탕 루진 푸스서 와요 디 줍투 그래 섬 이세기라 디컵스 담줄 된쳐와디 이니 니마 레긴 갸처를 두거라 먼저 기부 중은 것은 기부 중은 남 두에게 니바 여바디 된쳐와 기부 다저 된쳐에 된다라 기부 링이 것 남들 들에게 갸쳐라 탈벽 고fan도 두에게 남도 거라 어디든 들리든 되게 탈벽 고fan도 두에게 남나가서 줍두 그래 뒤두에게 갈긴다 튕긴 상여래 어디든 니만 레경 하고도 된쳐와는 싸쳐라 인디 단절니게 똑바 공표도 줘 그래. 인디다 단절 된쳐와디 양 공표도 줘디 단절 된 데르 된쳐에 단절디 양결 세딜라 닝보 말은 버전에 식송나 연결 니가와 임바 시 인디드니 니가에 들어와 천왕디양 덮쳐와든 갸쳐와든 숙쳐와요. 디르웨드니 된칠라 니가웨드니 자주르 밀리디 세딜라 미다바 지글라와 임바 세나 디르웨드니 지등기 된쳐와든 니가와 임베 천왕 숙치모 여바 대성기드니 지글라와 미다바 삼베 아니 삼바디양 덮쳐와요. 니숙쳐와요. 디가수드니 미다고 드시디양 켜버진 차기 달주르 켜버진 통도 그 된디기드니 단주 된실라 니에가웨드니 단주디 지글라와레 삼지 지글라와 임베드니 미다고 드시디양 하장기 니바침보
This urgent wish to engage in the path leading to liberation is enthusiasm. This enthusiasm, this urgency is nothing other than diligence. Diligence refers to this enthusiasm for the practice of the path, which is the basis for attaining liberation. Based on that enthusiasm, we then make all the efforts to engage in the practice of the path. We're ready to go. So then what? We have this urgent wish to engage in the path, the enthusiasm, the diligence just brimming to the surface. And then the question comes to mind, can we do it or not? Is this practice something that can actually be enacted by me or not? And then we can consider that whether or not that's possible depends on having freedom from any hindrances, any unfavorable conditions, namely the 8 leisureless states. But the priceless human existence has the 8 freedoms of being without those unfavorable conditions. It also has the 10 resources that are the favorable conditions for practicing the path. When we really connect with our condition of being free of the unfavorable conditions and rich in the favorable ones, we develop great confidence in our ability to practice the path. Moreover, our appreciation for the freedoms and resources of this priceless human existence grows broader. Our perspective widens. Of course, there's an appreciation for the great meaning and a rarity of these priceless human existence with its freedoms and resources at the level of the initial degree of spiritual maturity. But there, the value is tied to its ability to yield a favorable set of future rebirths. At the intermediate degree of spiritual maturity, the understanding is broader. the great meaning and purpose of the freedoms and resources of a priceless human existence are understood to have a more broad impact because they are the basis for attaining liberation from samsara altogether. In that way, when we understand we have everything it takes to enact that practice, we are not hindered by all the unfavorable conditions that would block the way, then our comprehension of the great value of the freedoms and resources of this priceless human existence becomes even greater. We become more appreciative. We value this condition even more than we already did. Then when we have this understanding of the great meaning of those freedoms and resources as a basis for attaining liberation, and we recognize that this life has no substantial pith, there's nothing lasting to it. In other words, it's very difficult to obtain these freedoms and resources again, however meaningful they may be. This understanding, however strong we recognize the great meaning of these freedoms and resources, the difficulty of attaining them, when we reflect on the impermanence of mortality, the end of this very life, then that meaning and rarity of our freedoms and resources yields an understanding of equal proportion of its fragility. When we see how fragile it is, we have the understanding of its great meaning and its rarity, then we have a really powerful, extraordinary understanding of impermanence in the form of mortality. This understanding of the great meaning, the rarity, and the fragility of the freedoms and resources yields immense power. We have this urgent wish to attain liberation. We understand that it depends on practicing the path of the genuine Dharma. So then we are driven to avoid the misguided priorities of busying ourselves with the things of worldly value. We instead seek to practice a Dharma, and we have great enthusiasm for that. So that overcomes the laziness of the misguided priorities, which is another way of saying being busy with worldly activities. That comes about through understanding the great meaning, rarity, and fragility of this life, the freedoms and resources that allow us to put that path of genuine Dharma into practice. That understanding, that we have these freedoms and resources at hand, is what allows us to overcome this sheepish laziness, the laziness of self-doubt. We have the confidence that we have what it takes. Then we also understand that because it is fragile and rare to encounter with all its great meaning, this priceless human existence is not guaranteed to occur again in the next life, allowing us to continue to practice the Dharma, understanding its fragility, its meaning, and its rarity, and understanding that there's no telling how much time we have overcomes the laziness of procrastination. We see that there is no time to waste. This yields consummate diligence, a diligence that has overcome all three kinds of laziness. It is the diligence that remedies all three kinds of laziness. This consummate diligence, when it is fully present, makes it impossible that we will not engage in the practice of the path.
Hola. Tiene cosas de danjur dunchewe samba khabarchen danjur nie gawe samba khabarchen danjur ani jiglawa imbe samba khabarchen kiedi lam dunnyerwe samba khabarchen la ralagira lam dunnyerwe samba khabarchen de tharba dunnyergi lo khabarchen la ralagido tharba dunnyergi lo khabarchen di ani kurwe nimik thongwe danjugi samba khabarchen la ralagido di kurwe nimik shibadi thamjegi tawaredo 그게 동을 신의 델레제이션 타와리 아니 강기 삼바 림바 망고도 디 탐제 켜버진도 길메겨디 그래 님이 통해 삼바 켜버진 예매를 알아기도 디인도 상기기 동을 시버자 송해디 배 메시드니 남기 냠닝기 내가 전부 요래 송해 이내 난서 디방라 we avoid this we avoid the main point.
This extraordinary understanding of the immense meaningfulness and purpose of the freedoms and resources of a priceless human existence, the extraordinary understanding of their rarity, the extraordinary understanding of their incredible fragility. What do these do? They lead to the extraordinary mindset of urgently wanting to practice the path, which itself is the extraordinary mindset that urgently seeks liberation. But where does all that come from? Where do all these understandings at this extraordinary degree come from? They all come from an extraordinary understanding of the defects of samsara in its entirety. This is the root of all things, the source of the drive towards liberation. There are many levels that I just detailed of understanding. The understanding of the meaning of the freedoms and resources, the value of the path, the urgent seeking of liberation, etc. And it all comes down to this, understanding the defects of samsara. This is why the Buddha leads in the first of the four truths with this instruction: recognize suffering. This is the suffering of samsara. It is the absolutely most essential point of the practice, but we avoid it. We avoid the main point. It would be funny, except it really isn't.
되게 기분 등기 니 신이셔래. 다 기분 전부 다 기분 등기 캐셔리 거를 니 랑된도 탈바점 쪼드는 여와 디 기분 등기다 캐셔디라. 탈바점 쪼드는 여와 디양 랑된도 탈바점 쪼드는 여와 탐색해 받는 여와 말아. 탈바텀나 리고 그런 게 탈도 덤자래. 디양 랑된도 심진 탐제 탈바텀나 삼바데 여 말아. 나랑 지부 탈바토고도 삼바. 저도 랑든도 탈바점 든든이라디 기부 딩 캐셔레 마도 시 코로알랑이 중게 탈바 든든이라디 기부 첨벌한 거구라디 이네 기부 첨벌 코로알레 아니 코알레 니믹스다 코알레 아니 이중게 탈바 토구도 삼바 게 적으라 이네 탈바점디 든든이도 말아 기부 첨벌이 이네 랑든도 든든이 될게 말아 나랑 지부 탈바 토고 삼바디 여 말아 이 나랑 지부 세랑 탈바점 세디 파피잖아 근데 현재 상황 기부 첨벌한 거구라 기부 첨벌 남전에 너무 코알랑 이중 게거라 탈바 토고 삼바디 거라 코알에 타르고 삼 거라 말해
Nari.
어디 있는 것은 아니 랑전도 듣는 일화당 대점 듣는 일화지 여 말해 그래서 탐제 또어디 그래서 탐제킴 봐라 탐제킴 그 말해 시와 초직은 양대디 말해 어디 있는 것은더니 미니빈 양대디 양 탐제킴 그 반대 양 이 랑전도 말해 심징이 되더라 어디 있는데니 이 용해라던 뭐 코알랑 이중게 기바디 기부 첨벌한 거구라 이난 기부 첨벌의 능력이 투명히 남라야 돼
So that explains the defining characteristics of the intermediate degree of spiritual maturity. And the main features there are an urgency that seeks liberation and not beyond that seeks a liberation for one's own sake and not beyond that. So there is not an urgency that is seeking the state of omniscience at this intermediate degree of spiritual maturity. The aim is for liberation for one's own sake alone and not more than liberation. So there are these two aspects to it. The extent is limited to, it goes to liberation alone, and the breadth is for one's own sake alone. When we turn next to the optimal degree of spiritual maturity, the optimal degree of spiritual maturity also has these qualities of seeing the defects of samsara, developing reorientation of mind away from samsara to liberation from samsara altogether. But there is not a limitation to liberation and nothing more. There is not a liberation to one's own benefit and nothing more. The optimal degree of spiritual maturity unites the understanding of the defects of samsara, reorienting the mind away from it and towards liberation. But it goes beyond that. It is not just reorienting the mind away from samsara and towards liberation and no more than that. And it is not liberation for one's sake and no more than that. Why is that? Because principally speaking, the aim at the optimal degree of spiritual maturity is to attain the level of omniscience, also known as Buddhahood. It is not limited to the unilateral nirvana of a liberation for one's own sake alone. It seeks the dynamic nirvana that is able to benefit others and not only oneself. How does this come about? When this comes about, there is this reorientation of mind away from samsara that seeks liberation. And to that extent, that motivation is one shared between the intermediate and optimal degrees of spiritual maturity.
Hola. Dina dadla che lamdo doa sedi. Dini kibu dingdang chimbunigi tumoe wangdu jena. Tene Koatara Ginimic Rigne, any call a Tandugi Sambala, Jimin Ginyatamba. Jungna, Tini Chilam the door. Did with somebody Gunin Langde, Luidanga, he Sumgi Chawa Garajanem, Titarvelam Chagre. Tindan Chilam the door.
The Dharma becoming the path is something that we can understand from the perspective of this path shared in common with the intermediate and optimal degrees of spiritual maturity. It's the understanding of the defects of samsara in its entirety, that in its entirety, it is the recognition that it is suffering. The wish to be free of that arises in consequence in a manner that is an unfabricated and experiential understanding. That arising in mind is what is called the Dharma becoming the path. In particular, what that means is that that mindset motivates any activity of body, speech, and mind so that everything we do becomes the path to liberation. This is what is called the Dharma becoming the path.
Hola. Tini that dikasu Koratara Nimi Rigne, in call a dolway, Tarbat, the Nella Chiming Nyotambe Kasu, Tini Kibu Dingi Rigin, so call a dolway Tarba, Shivacho Chibutam. Rangni chibu dindu dundi nyergidwa di gare lamgi tubare kibu chimbi wangda jana digi dini sangyo goban tuwe gi lamle goldo gdwa nyenchi goban rangil goban tuwe lamla chukdo gre samba digi di inzadini tamje kimbe lamgi kolsar di inzad lam tulbar di indi dini sumba kare gore lam tulbasala gora tulba de sel gora di inzad sumba lam tulbasala asungara
This unfabricated experiential understanding that recognizes the defects of samsara in its entirety and consequently seeks to be free of it in the state of liberation is the mindset of beings with the disposition for this intermediate degree of spiritual maturity. It's a mindset that is aimed at liberation alone for one's own sake. And from the perspective of the optimal degree of spiritual maturity, even this very advanced experiential understanding is a delusion or mistake about the path. It is a mindset that seeks to attain the level of nirvana of the Shravaka or disciples and Prateka Buddha or solitary realizers. From the perspective of omniscience, this is a deviation from the path. You could say that it's a delusion or a mistake about the path, and that it does not extend all the way to omniscience. This leads to the third of the four dharmas of Gampopa, the path dispelling delusion, because it is vital to dispel that mistake or delusion as to the extent of the path to reach to omniscience.
Tene da lam gi tulba di kare gi segri lan lam tulba di se de ne kunzu janchu gi sem gi segira o tin de ne kunzu janchu gi sem sana gar re lan na ni da kibu chimbe sen yi shan na kambo kibu chimbo se di nyungji chimbe shang de gyur jing simjin shin dungal ke be churdu namgen den de nerjing dei gyu chindu dan paradu chimba dugam yang na sangala jungna dile laba rimbani kirim da sogrim la loba lam parjin dugdan ini sangal lam la jungna kirim da sogrim la loba dijidi ko sedini kibu chimbi keshi sumdo ningji chimbi shawand gyur samjin thamje dungal le kebe chidu sangi gopon don nyer Teigyu parjin dugam rimbani la loba ningji chimbi shawand gyurba senden de sangi gopon don nyerwa ani sangi gopon to begyu parjin dugdam rimbani la nyamne jeba keji sumding gansadi kibu chimbore la
So what is it that is able to dispel this mistake, this misperception about the path? It is the rare and supreme mindset of bodhicitta, the mind of awakening, that dispels this. So it's good to start out with the defining characteristics at this optimal degree of spiritual maturity. And the defining characteristics are as follows. The optimal degree of spiritual maturity is the mindset that is governed by great compassion and driven by that seeks to free all other sentient beings from suffering. And in order to do that, urgently seeks the state of omniscience by practicing its causes, which can be of two different kinds. The path of the six paramitas, or transcendent virtue, is one pathway to that omniscience. The second is goes beyond even that to the methods of secret mantra, the creation and completion stage practices. So there are practitioners at this optimal degree of spiritual maturity engaging in these two kinds of practice. But the features they hold in common are that they are governed. The Tibetans very strong. They're under the power, dominated by great compassion. And that great compassion drives them to seek to free other beings of their suffering. In order to do so, there's this urgent seeking for the unsurpassed state of omniscience. The difference comes in the causes for that path of state of omniscience. One set of practitioners is practicing the path of the six paramitas, the transcendent virtues, while the other engages in secret mantra. This is the description of the optimal degree of spiritual maturity.
Hola. O teni da nando kibu chimbe keje sumdi tene 닝지 심비 샹원도 기르발라 tene 신전도 상교 고방 토바 돈돈이라고 되는 거래. 대라 tene tene 퍼진도 기 냠nen 암 기름당 소름 기 냠nen 돈돈이라고 되게 티인자들이 닝지 심비 샹원도 기바디 신만이기 싸와래. 닝지 심보 기버진이나 탐지 김바드니르 기버진 게 그래. 될 때네 탐지 김바드니르 기버진이나 아니 람드니르 람 퍼진 두기냐면 라돈니르 바디 기버진 게 그래.
These three characteristics of the optimal degree of spiritual maturity, being dominated, governed by great compassion, seeking to dispel the suffering of other beings, and urgently wishing to attain omniscience in order to do so, is the basis upon which the practitioner develops this urgent wish to either engage in the practice of the 6 paramitas, the transcendent virtues, or the urgent wish to engage in the practice of the creation and completion stages of secret mantra. But the root source of all of this happening in a way that is genuine is that genuine great compassion that drives the entire process, leading to an extraordinary degree of urgent seeking for omniscience, which in turn yields an extraordinary degree of motivation for the practice of the transcendent virtues and so forth.
디바디 닝지 심보디 컨디스 닝지 심비 샹원도 기바디 컨디스 차그래 딜라 타고다 말이 닝지 심비 샹원도 기나더니 현전도 탐정 김바든도 니와 용그래 탐정 김바 현전도 돈도 니와 연나더니 디시 규 퍼진도 기 냠넬라 던네 게그래 디인데더니 다 게치시드 거래로 닝지 심비 샹원도 기바더래도 얘네들 닝지 심비 시험도 그거 그래 시험 그래 라면 닝지 심비 규칙도 그래 내중래 딜라도 그서다 그게 동안 통하디 계심으로도 기부 등이 람 던질 기와 마사더니 기부 심비 닝지 심보 캐버진 대양 될라더니 그래 얘네들 내중디 닝지 심보 규래 그러지네라나 내중 닝지 캐버 그래라면 네가 동을레 단도에 가지 봐래. 이중선에 동을레 더버도 봐래. 닝제선에 동을레 더버도 봐래. 켜봐 그래서는 땡 가가래. mikpa khagare. Ningje di simje shin dunga le daldere, ngijung di ngarang dunga le daldere. Dangbo ngarang dunga le daldere mena simje shin dunga le daldere garis kegre. Ketu maradi. Odinza any rang dunga le daldere khwa thala dunga de she dele daldere gi samba shuk chum kade yena. Te zamgi shin dunga le daldere gi samba di ketu ra. 어디인자더니 닝지 신부 계획이 규칙 니중을 해. 랑규기 그룹의 동을통 델레 던적이 선바 계획 거수 얘는 디 냠용디 신라 애플라이제나 되니 신다양 동을레 던적이 선바 계획이라 어디인자 닝지 계획이 규칙이 이중을 해서 그래.
So when you hear all this, there's this natural question that comes to mind. How do I do that? How do I come under the influence of great compassion in this extensive way? How am I governed by that? Isn't that so? Doesn't that question immediately come to mind when you hear this description? If we understand that this urgent seeking for omniscience in order to benefit others arises from being governed by great compassion, and that in turn leads to a similar degree of power in our drive to engage in the causes for that omniscience, the practice of the 6 paramitas, etc., driven by that great compassion, we naturally want to know, well, how do I do that? I want to get me some of that great compassion. How do I get there? So guess what? The cause of this great compassion is renunciation, reorienting the mind from samsara, having seen that it is in its entirety unfulfilling, dukkha, suffering. This is why it's so very important. I cannot overstate the importance of seeing that samsara in its entirety is unsatisfying. It's a mindset that has been fueling all of the degrees of spiritual maturity and becomes even broader in scope in the optimal degree of spiritual maturity than in the intermediate degree of spiritual maturity. And the cause of that great compassion is reorientation of mind. Why is that? Why is reorienting the mind, renunciation, the cause? Because when you think about renunciation and compassion, they both have this, are the same in quality. They both involve the wish to be free of suffering. The difference is the focal point, the basis for that wish to be free of suffering. In reorientation of mind, renunciation, that wish is with respect to ourselves. We want to be free of suffering. Compassion is that same wish to be free of suffering applied to other beings. There's that sameness of the wish for freedom from suffering. And if we don't have the wish to be free of suffering as samsara in its entirety, how in the world would we ever have the wish to free others of that suffering of samsara, which is compassion? It won't happen. It is based on the extent to which we understand the unsatisfactory character of samsara in its entirety that we are able to develop a proportionate amount of great compassion. Whether we're able to come under the power, under the complete influence of great compassion, depends on having developed a proportional understanding of the defects of samsara in its entirety. This is why one of the causes of great compassion is reorientation of mind, renunciation that sees for oneself that samsara in its entirety is ultimately unfulfilling. It is dukkha, it is suffering. When this arises, then it is very easy to extend that, to apply it to others by extrapolating from our own experience, our own wish to be free of suffering. This is compassion. Its cause is renunciation.
Hola. 다 니중디 닝지기 교르도에 아니 깬 또데 그러라나 잠바래. 샘진의 미비 용기 잠바였나? 잠바 키버제나? 근데 잠바 디기 나랑기 규기 니중디 랑규기 둥얼도베 니중디 아니 샘진 신기기 둥얼라양 apply jegre chambadi gi jegre ti kasu dine simjin shingyu gi dungal yang rang simjin shen yang rang dan dawe dine dungal ki narwe sul dila misu be samba rang shingi kegre odin za dine yong gi chambadi la tenne ene ngejung di ningji gi ru dogre tin za dine 닝지 심리 상황도 그래 규칙 또 어디 가려나 잠바 심지는 미베 희용기 잠바들
If renunciation, reorientation of mind away from samsara for oneself, is one cause of great compassion. Then what is the cause, the condition that turns renunciation into compassion? How does that shift work? This depends on having an extraordinary degree of affection with respect to other beings. This term is one that is rooted in the same word as loving kindness or benevolence. This affection, this benevolent affection, is the critical feature. How it works is by really understanding the suffering that we experience in our own mind stream, all the way out to the subtlemost suffering. We can then extend that, extrapolate it to others, understanding that they too have this same experience. This is benevolence, the affection that naturally senses the suffering that torments other beings. This affectionate benevolence is what takes renunciation, reorientation of mind that we have ourselves, and turns it into great compassion.
The young jumper the Kaliski were and the Pinangaranzo Simjilla Tatsuli. Simjilla tiding on the superficial level, surface level, Pedro Chachana, Sedile Simbewangi. Sedile Simbewangi Tana, then a Tadang Nin Mangutongudo, Tadan Yin, Tadan Yin Yisungudo. In a Sedile Simba de Pangne, any Kiwangachi, but the Midawa in by Shiragi Gunetana, Danin Kiva Yomare. Tadan Yin Yomare, human sense being. Till a Danyan Yomare, Danyan also Sidle Simbadi Soro. Siddi Simbala Nangorma, the Munegi, sensing being the Dadan Yomare. The delegate things of Butana. Thing of the Kiwangashi, the Kota, the Dungal de Shela. That city didn't teach much Bumara. The Kova Tomala Tayomare, Maribo Mabambo to Tamala Tayomare, Garajanilanga, any the Kova Tam about the Garis Hagur Langa, to Kova, some of them didn't lay on Numong Namin Sumura, then did you need the tradition of Sumnandura? Numong that then Lesa, Lela, any Dungal Jung, the Numong lay Dungal Sundra. The starting Sure, ending Sure, and Yomare, stand the India Yomare. Colorado. The Numong Latine, Dungal Migni, Numonge, Dungal Numongi Migbagar, Dungala, as a Niling Humbodra. Niling Humbo, Migni, Numonke, Numong Latine, Lesa, Lay Latine, young Kawachima, Niling Humbokira. This is the Colorado. Tinashi Yadana Colora, say Digi, Pumbu Niling Pumbodi Kawangame Lela in a Jura. Kawangame lay the suicide in Numong Sara. Numong Garilla Muni Kiari, Kawangame Pumboli Munikira. The Dikogi Mipa, Numongi Mipa Pumbo the Governor, Di Kawangame Lela Kira, Dingame Lela Kira. This is the Ya, Toma Mavadure. Tomanigmare, Colora. My identity Kurgurada. Say digidini, Pumbol Muni, Numon Kida, Numon Digi less Agida, Lay Digi, young Kawajami, naming Pumbo Kira, young Numon Boshire, young Kawachimi, naming Pumbo de Lamini, Numon Kira, Numon Digi less Agira, young Kawachimi, naming Pumbo Kira, Didi, Mariba Mabangi Bardo, Tametayomare. Is that? Say didn't Chima some Marid. Croa Tomala Tayamare, Mariba Mabamba, Tamala Tayamare. Did over Croala Tomana Tame by Isigena, the Nick Chagre. 심진 탐제 파마인 바래 이시게 그래. 심진 탐제 년래 년이 능내 터도 방아래. 어디다? 아니 잠바 코레님이 되고 시나? 근데 심진 탐제 파마인 바 시네 용기 잠바양 될때는 게 그래. 디 코레님이 공부디 꽤 계신 거래 성래. 잠바양 될때는 게 그래. 닝지양 될때는 게 그래. But we avoid this crucial point.
The question naturally arises, where does this benevolent affection come from? When you think about it, when we look out on the sentient beings, other sentient beings, there are many different ways we can see them. We can see them in a very superficial way on the surface. This is what happens when, for example, we have a reification of the things of this life. Reifying the things of this life, having this fixated attachment leads to dividing people dualistically into friends and enemies, loved ones and foes. Then we end up with a huge amount of friends and enemies based on that. It's by overturning that, recognizing that this life is impermanent, recognizing that we are governed by karmic causality, that we're able to overturn this reification of the things of this life, the fixated attachment that is the cause of seeing beings as friends or enemies, labeling them in this way. When we have overturned that reification, we do not see them in this dualistic way. All beings are humans, not just all people are humans, and not just that, all beings are sentient beings. There is no labeling of friend and enemy. This is the benefit of overturning reification of the things of this life that classifies even beings based on what we can get. Then we can go deeper, seeing beings on an even deeper level. We can see that this is the case, and not only with respect to this life, but other lives as well. We can begin to plumb the depths of samsara, finding that it is infinite in extent. Whether we look forward or back, there is no way to find a endpoint of samsara. Until ignorance is uprooted, there is no end in the direction of what we call the future. And looking backwards, there is no beginning. Why is that? Because samsara is basically this cycle of kleshas, karma, and dukkha, kleshas, karma, and dukkha, kleshas, karma, and dukkha, over and over and over again. Kleshas, the emotions that disturb mind's natural tranquility, drive us to engage in karmic action under their power, and that leads to dukkha, any of the various kinds of suffering. It is a cycle. There is no start and no end. This is why samsara literally means a cycle, a circle. You cannot find a start, and there is no natural endpoint that emerges on its own. The critical piece again are these self-perpetuating skandhas or aggregates, this body-mind complex. With reference to our own body-mind complex, these self-perpetuating aggregates, we give rise to kleshas, which drive karmic action, and that leads to a later set of self-perpetuating skandhas, which experience suffering. They are of the character of suffering themselves. Then, based on those skandhas as a reference point, we develop new kleshas. That leads to new karmic action and yet more self-perpetuating skandhas. This cycle continues over and over and over again. The body-mind complex, the skandhas that we have attained in this life, we use that as a reference point to compartmentalize beings. That leads to any number of kleshas, that leads to karmic actions motivated by those kleshas, and that leads to a new set of self-perpetuating skandhas in future lives. We can look at it backwards or forwards, where did these self-perpetuating skandhas of this life come from? They are the suffering that are the result of karma from a previous life, and that karma is a result of kleshas from the previous life with respect to those self-perpetuating skandhas. Keep going. There's no beginning. Go previous to that life. Where did those self-perpetuating skandhas of the nature of suffering come from? From the karmic actions of the life previous to that. Where did that come from? From the kleshas with respect to the self-perpetuating skandhas in that life, and so forth. The same applies if we look forward. These self-perpetuating skandhas will yield a future set of self-perpetuating skandhas. And with reference to those, we will develop new kleshas. Those will drive new karmic action, and that will lead to suffering in the form of another set of self-perpetuating skandhas. This continues without end as long as ignorance is not eradicated. No beginning to be found in the past, no end to naturally arise until ignorance is eradicated in the future. When we see this in this way, when we develop confidence of the infinite character of samsara in this way, that we can go back and back and back, infinite lifetimes without finding a start, we can recognize that in each of those lives, we have had connections with all beings. All beings have been our loved ones, and not just loved ones, our ultimate loved ones, our own dear family, our own parents. This all comes from seeing the defects of samsara. It is from understanding these defects of samsara, this cycle of kleshas, karma, and dukkha, cycling over and over again without number, infinite lives in which beings have been our parents. This is the basis for developing benevolent affection. It is out of understanding the character of samsara and its defects that we develop reorientation of mind, the renunciation that seeks liberation. It is based on the defects of samsara that we develop compassion. It is based on the defects of samsara that we develop benevolent affection, and yet we avoid it.
인다들이 korwa 통매 라 korwa 님이 삼주가서 korwa 통매 라 희식게 고거라 다 먼저 된다 뒤에 동동이들이 korwa 님이 개침보 먼저 섬로다요 말에 korwa 님이 개침보 섬로다는데 korwa 통매 임발라 희식게 고거래 뒤에들은 korwa 통매 임발라 희식게서는 될 때에는 심제 탐자 파만 임발라 희식게도 그래 뒤에선 korwa 님이 건바디 심제 탐자 파만 시야기 탑셔래 tumje tumje pamara shena di tumje dinje imba di tumje ki din jamba da din so la so di la tene yong gi jamba ketu gre di di korwe nimi jamba di yong gi jamba ke gi gyang chago re 다 용기 좀밖에 규지 거래라나 이런 거라서 가상 기부 중의 람 시리 것수 기부 중의 람디 거래라는 미기 주봉기 수림래 미기 주봉기 수림디 술라드네 계기래라나 심진 신라드네 계기래 먼저 세딜의 심박기디 랑조 신디드네 심진 신라 너버 제기라 디기 규 거래라는 겨와시망 연성 계기도 연성디 랑라드네 용어도 Ngensong le pang ngensong le dol ne 토리 톱거나 심진신라 조합방고도 이 토리 톱에디 심진 된 도구도 민성디 랑라 된 도구도 이 기부 중에 라면에 심진라 된 거래 디나지 기부 딩기 라면에 기부 딩기 람 라바솜레 라바솜기 따와디 스림로 스림기 미고디 심진래 심진 틈제라 조합방고라 어디에 가서 되니 기부 딩이 라미네 심전에 되네 기부 와래 어디에 되니 심전디 기부 딩 충우당 딩기 람 계획이 되니 오 미과소 람 냠랭이 미과소 임바디 시에나 되니 희도 홍화 통그래 심전에서 쳐버리 매봐 더등 심진 처방 연바는 삼방 연바연은 더등 람기 미과 책이라 어디에 들어가서 아니 심진기 처바 상행이 켜버려 매봐 니링기 켜버려 매봐 정말 희도홍의 율도 찬연 같은 거래다 찍 같은 거래 이빼 메시지니 심진을 딱술 띵 잡아라 켜버려 되래다
This confidence in the beginningless character of samsara is an important thing to develop. And as little time as we have in this set of teachings, it's not possible to go into all of the various defects in great detail, but it boils down to really developing this confidence in the defects of samsara. It's not only in a single point, but in its infinite character. Having the confidence of samsara as extending without beginning is what allows us to develop confidence of all beings as our parents. It's what allows us to develop the affection for all beings that holds them to be as dear parents, not in an ordinary way, but in a deep-rooted, broad-going way. This is what comes about from seeing the defects of samsara without beginning. This is what extends the benevolent affection towards beings in extent and makes it deep as well. We can also see it in another way. Let's go back to that initial degree of spiritual maturity. The practice of that path is the ethical discipline of abandoning the 10 non-virtues. But how do we do that? How do we abandon the 10 non-virtues? It's by means of other beings. Other beings are the basis for us to not engage in a non-virtue. When we have this reification of the things of this life, we become the primary focus of our actions, not others. This activity is what yields non-virtues to get as much as we can for our own sake. This yields negative rebirths. So it is based on selfishness that our mindset engages in actions that leads to negative existence. And it is based on referencing the benefit of others, an altruistic mindset that allows us to gain favorable rebirths and definitive excellence. These two depend on other beings. Compassion depends on other beings. The path of intermediate degree of spiritual maturity, the 3 trainings, begins with ethical discipline. There we are again. The basis for pure ethical discipline is other sentient beings. To avoid wrongdoing and engage in virtue depends on sentient beings as a reference point. So also the path of the intermediate degree of spiritual maturity depends on sentient beings. Both of these 2 initial paths have other sentient beings as the reference point that allows us to gain their benefits. The practice of their path depends on other sentient beings. And similarly, the development of benevolent affection towards other beings depends on other beings. This wide-ranging mindset is the reference point of the path. It's one that sees beings in a genuinely affectionate way without prejudice, holding some close and others distance, having an equality towards all beings, that sees all beings as equal in their value for having a feeling of benevolent affection. This is a way to see beings that is in and of itself wonderful, and taking that deeper and broader is what characterizes this benevolent affection. That's the difference between benevolent affection and ordinary ways of seeing beings.
기부 준비 남기 원이잖아. 이 기부 준비 남디 삼바 장주초도 셈게 이 저와 파르도 준비 두 냠len 냠슬렘바 니나라도 그러 삼절니 어디인데는 삼바 장주기 셈대양 셈제는 명리 깨고 그러 mikba 셈제라 이 저와 파르진 두기 냠len이 너네 Jimba, Sudrim, Soba. The Migba, Simjera. The main beda, Janjus and Benjamin, or doing over she, Perchin Dugnan, doing over Shiera, doing over she, the young, Simjan Migne, Migba Simjera. Or the take what in be Lamin Mangcha. Simjen Migne, Jegugare. Kija to Durdishana, and the Nambasangi be chudi, then Chignina la Dugre Songdo, Simjen la Chawapang, Simjen la Nebapang, Pember Drup Sore. Simjen la Pember Drupa, no Nebapang, Nina la Dugre Songda. In the Kibu Chung Lamdang, Kibu Dingy Lamdi, Simjen la Chawapang, Nebapang. Takwa Chimbudi, Nebapang Gangla, Pember Drup. Takwa Chimbe Lamre. Dordishena. The Indicasu, Takwa Chichung Lam Nigagi Mikbadi Garedu, Simjeredu. The any around the Gula, Kibu Chung Lam Yamne, Simjang Kadine. Kibu Dingy Lam Yamne Jebadian, Simjang Kadine. Kibu Chimbe Lam Yamne in a Tamjakimba Tobadian, Simjang Kadine. Dilla Ichikina, Simje Tamji Hajangi Dinchimbo. Tongure, Dinchimbo Tona, either Homa Tongure. Dilla Hyung Chambala.
On the Mahayana path, the optimal degree of spiritual maturity, there is a mindset and an application and an engagement that goes with it. The mindset is bodhicitta, the mind of awakening that arises and leads to the application, the engagement in the practice of the 6 paramitas, or the 4 ways of gathering disciples or students. So this mindset and application together comprises the path of optimal degree of spiritual maturity of the Mahayana. But when you think about it, how does one develop bodhicitta, the mind of awakening? It's with reference to sentient beings that develops. How does one engage in the 6 paramitas, for example, the transcendent virtues? Generosity, ethical discipline, patience, all of these occur with a focus of sentient beings. The practice of bodhicitta, consisting of the 4 ways of gathering students, there too, the focal point is other sentient beings. So the frame of reference for all our practice principally is other sentient beings. On the level of the initial and intermediate degrees of spiritual maturity, of course, there's the discipline of avoiding harm, nonviolence to other beings. At the optimal degree of spiritual maturity, there is that avoidance of harm to other beings and also the accomplishment of their ultimate benefit as well. Both of these require sentient beings as the reference point. So whether we're speaking about engaging in the practice of the initial, intermediate, or optimal degrees of spiritual maturities, all of those practices depend on the immense kindness of sentient beings. Seeing it that way, we are able to place great value on other beings. We're able to see them with affection. And that benevolent affection is what we're talking about here. Uh-oh. Konda Drupon Kabbalah internet tis droson data lebson and tis droson.
Derabi Hyungi Jambadi Sumjin Tamjela Niring Meba Dene O Solwa Mebe Nyuma Tensona Derabi Hyungi Jamba Tulmigi Nyuma Sumjin Tamjela Niring Meba Tensona Chikba Dene Jamba Tedera Derabi Jamba Kebar Jendela Dene Sumjin Tamjela Tadi Gasu Sumjin Tamje Devi Pongsulla Samna Devada Dena Sambe Jamba Gigre Sumjin Tamje Dungal Ginarsulla Samlatana Yongi Jamba Digunetana Then Jambe Yuri Sumjin Dungal Ginarsulla Samlatandi Narsul Tondu Gasu, then Dungal the Dalna Sambe somebody Ranchi Kigira Resulchibo Jego Mare.
This benevolent affection is also marked by an experiential understanding that is effortless and authentically sees all beings without prejudice, holding some close and others distant. That benevolent affection is the basis upon which we build. When we see beings with this mindset of benevolent affection, we long for them to have plentiful, abundant happiness without end. That is a loving kindness, the wish for beings to have happiness. Along with that, when that benevolent affection sees the suffering that torments beings, we naturally have the wish for them to be free of that suffering. The wish that is loving kindness, that beings have happiness, and the wish that they be free of suffering arises naturally, spontaneously, without effort, right out of that benevolent affection.
Hola. Derabi O Deva Dendugi Jambadang Dungal Dendugi Ningji Nidi Gomba Gombil Dudona Tini Kariyungure Simjin Tamje Deva Dang Dembang Nejigi Dungal Le Dalwa Nejigi Sambedini Lasam Kigre Sumre Deva Dena Sambadang Dungal Dalna Sambatam Mare Ini Deva Dembang Nejigi Dungal Le Dalwa Nejigi Sambe Samlo Lasam Kigre Sumre Thing as a Shindin do said the Shindin Dira Shindin Dunir Sambaradi. Shendin Denjil somebody Shukchimogudi, any Shendin Narangi Sambanashin to be never than the Yomaranga Sola. Tingara Hagura. Tanda Mebatan the Mother, Mombalanga, Kuliguri, Gabuchana, the Narangi somebody Shang to Tumara, Digi. Yanti Rajabachana to Tumara. That's you do to Gurela, the Sangimata Yomara, did do to Gindi. The Hagodi Gazu. Did any Narangi Sambanashi, Simjin Tamje, Devada, Dungal Dalwa, Soyala, any Nevada Dembadi, and Sangima the Meva Hagodi, and then oh Shendin do some Narangi any Sambanashi, Dungal Dal, Devada Demba Jela, Neva Sangima the Midu, or the end of the Sangi Gohan Togu, someday some Gaira. Tell a Chanchu Dunir Lola. Dini Tandu was the Chanchu Seminar, the Kunza Chanchu Sem said. Complete chart. The Dagi, English mission on the Gurne, Simjin Tamji, Sangil, Simjin Tamji, Dungal give a chidu, Sangi Gopang, don't the Nero said, zero, Chanchu Sem dir. Gay Gurum did over. You like gay Gurum did over.
Loving kindness or maitri and karuna is this wish that beings have genuine happiness. Compassion or karuna in Sanskrit is this wish that beings be completely free of suffering. As we develop this we habituate ourselves to this more and more until it develops its full power. That leads to the exceptional resolve that is not content with just wishing that beings have happiness and be free of suffering in its entirety. It's the exceptional resolve that says, I take the responsibility for this. I will ensure that beings have happiness genuinely and are completely free of suffering. This exceptional resolve is the urgency that seeks to benefit others. When we speak of benefiting others, this is what it's referring to, the exceptional resolve that takes upon oneself the responsibility of attaining this benefit of others, consisting of establishing them in complete happiness and complete freedom from suffering. When we have that exceptional resolve, we have that mindset, and we urgently seek to accomplish others' benefit in this way. If we're honest, we have to recognize right now, I don't have the power to do that. That really hits to the heart. I don't have the power now. Even if I were able to attain the state of a universal monarch within samsara, that state does not have the power to accomplish this ultimate benefit of others. Neither does the state of the arhats, of the shravaka or disciples, or the prateka Buddhas, solitary realizers. Of all possible states, only Buddhahood has the capacity to benefit beings in this ultimate way, none other. So having this sense of urgency of accomplishing others' benefit, the exceptional resolve that says, I take the responsibility for establishing beings in complete happiness and completely freeing them from suffering, and understanding that in order to do that, only the state of Buddhahood suffices. The mindset that resolves, I must attain Buddhahood, arises. This is what is called rare and supreme bodhicitta. It is the mindset that urgently seeks enlightenment. It is the consummate mind of awakening, the bodhicitta. This is what is referred to in this description of the being of optimal spiritual maturity, being dominated by great compassion, driven to accomplish freedom of suffering of other beings, and to do so, the wish to attain the level of omniscience. And this is the explanation of how that bodhicitta in its consummate level is developed in sequence, step by step.
Hola. Ta diro de simjin shingi dundu changchu dunirgi sambala chimingi nyotamba. Chima mayimbe nyokena. Di gausu dini kebuchimbi lam gyula kyore tangbo. Changchu sim gyula kyo sina di gausu shara. Kebuchimbi lam gyula kyore.
The experience that is effortless and authentic of seeking enlightenment for the benefit of other beings, driven by this great compassion, is the activation of bodhicitta in the mind stream. It is the activation of the path of the optimal degree of spiritual maturity.
Hola. Ta diro dini shinjindu changchu togudu sambe samlotra chimingi nyotamba ke di komba kongpildu rona. Dini changchu dundu nirji changchu di ini gyu garela dini togure. Di samlotandu dini gyu parjindu ki nyamnin la rale ba shidi gasu. Dundu nirji changchu di parjindu ki debu yinba shena. Dini parjindu gila kini nyamnin tarjina changchu togure. Parjindu ki nyamnin mena changchu togu mare. Di haa godi gasu, di delwa di haa gosu na. Dini ji tamgi changchu dunirgi samba yoba, de tamgi dini parjindu ki nyamnin dundu nirga samba di kegire. Shukchawa kegire. Dini ta, ini changchu dunir la jimingi nyuwa tumbe kapsu, dendegi changchu di gyu, ini parjindu ki yinba la Yeshe kedi gasu, parjindu ki dundu nirwa la jimingi nyuwa tungire. Di parjindu ki nyamnin la toy tundirwa, towarwa. Di indi gasu dini, o di tundi tangol. Jawang ngishingi lelo dang talwe tundi. Thukwa chimbi, ini sangi ki kopon tubi lam tumo mayimba parjindu ki nyamnin la towa. Jawang ngishingi kibu chungu samgi lam dang, kibu ding samgi lam la shimba mayimba. Dini sangi kopon tubi kibu tumo mayimba parjindu ki lam la towa kibu wara. Jawang ngishingi lelo ki nyambo duwa. Di kapsu dini, dirabe lamdi nga dup tukurabe samna, dini rangi daljuki luidi, dirabe thakwa chimbe lamdi yang dubyaga nibayaba, kalginda dal tungin sangayaba shena, daljo donshawa di yang hajangi gyachimbo, ding sabu kegi, daljo donshawa kowe lodi. Di kapsu, gilu gule lo bangarawa, o dup tukidu kararasana nga rangi luidendi, ini kibu chimbe lam dup tukiyagi kalginda dal singin sangaridu, di gilu gule lo bangarawa. Di kapsu dini, sedila dup matuna kiawa jima dup chukuri sambe shishulgi lelo gena, ini nye kawa yinba samla tanda kapsu, ini chishulgi lelo, chimala tibe chishulgi lelo bangarawa. Dido denchawada nye kawa tam keparchin kiri kapsu, regi dini, den cheshing niya kawe ludin kebrajindi namji chame chigla ba samla tande kasu teni midabe dishidi yang tumo mai ba kigre hajangi shukchimbo dang gyachimbo del tene deni se dile tebe chishulgi lelo thamo yang pangdo du kasu tundi thogachimbe lamdu bal tundi tumo mai ba kigre da tende tundi giding gasa di thogachimbe lamma du ba misbare Dela kibuchimbo la da di kasu ini lam tubasal la da lam tubasa wasa dire
So that mindset, the activation of the bodhicitta for the first time in the mind is the first instant of the path of the optimal degree of spiritual maturity, the authentic experience of the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of others in an ultimate way. Then through habituation, we cultivate that experience, making it grow stronger and stronger. So that initial experience that is unfabricated and effortless to attain enlightenment for the benefit of others is made stronger. Then out of that, there's the question, what's the cause of doing that? How do I accomplish this omniscience? And there's the understanding that it's by the practice of the 6 paramitas, the transcendent virtues, that Buddhahood arises. It depends on that practice as cause and result. Understanding the cause-result relationship between the 6 paramitas as cause and the level of Buddhahood as result, there is this similarly powerful, unfabricated experience of eagerness to accomplish the practice of the 6 paramitas. This eagerness is enthusiasm for the practice of the 6 paramitas that is not contrived, unfabricated. This is diligence. It is the diligence that is able to overcome the misguided priorities that engage one in the busyness of the things of this life. We instead direct our activities to the priority of the path of the 6 paramitas. Our enthusiasm drives us to engage in that path in all we do. It is not just an enthusiasm, a diligence that is within the scope of the initial or intermediate degrees of spiritual maturity. There isn't an attachment to those paths. There is the diligence that drives at the cause for Buddhahood, the state of omniscience, the practice of the 6 paramitas. In addition to overcoming the laziness of misguided priorities leading to busyness with the things of this life, there is this question that says, well, can I do it or not? Just as before, am I able to accomplish this Mahayana path? Here too, we see that it is simply due to not having unfavorable conditions and having favorable conditions that this is or is not possible. We see that we have the freedoms and resources that makes the practice of the Mahayana path possible. That deepens and strengthens our understanding of the great meaning, the purpose of the freedoms and resources. This is the mindset that truly understands the meaning and purpose of this priceless human existence with its freedoms and resources. It also overcomes sheepish laziness, the self-doubt that has us questioning whether we're able to do it or not. Of course we can do it. We have the freedoms and resources. That means we don't have any of the unfavorable conditions hindering us, and we have all the favorable conditions that empower us. Not only that, we're able to overcome this concern about, well, should I do it in this life or not? Maybe we can leave it to the next life. The laziness of procrastination is overcome when we couple that understanding of the great meaning and purpose of the freedoms and resources with the rarity of finding them, how difficult it is to encounter a priceless human existence such as this. Together with that, seeing how fragile this priceless human existence, all the freedoms, all the resources, everything it takes to lead to omniscience, that we develop an extraordinary understanding of impermanence. It's powerful, it's panoramic in perspective, and it is a consummate diligence for the path of Mahayana that this develops, overcoming all 3 kinds of laziness. With that kind of diligence, with that mindset, it's impossible not to engage in the path of the Mahayana. This is the path dispelling delusion.
all the lam Trubasel, the Truba Yeshe Charwas, Tabushi Shibadi.
From the path.
Truba Yeshe Charwas, the Shesul Niore, Shesul Mamboyore, Hineda, Dorduna, the Nina Latuna to go there. The Truba Yeshe Charwas, the Grisugore, Islana. Diva Pangsul de la Niera, Mungur Panga, 7 Pangas Niera. Then Mungur Panga de Garelan, the Penangarazo, Kunzo Binyamela Dene, Pena Chamba Gomna, Kunto Shidora, Saba Gomna, Kunto Shidora. Then young Nijun Gomna, Shincha Shidora, Lasoba. That the nation in Midu Bagomna, Yam Midak Bagomna, Chamba Shidore. O Daganashidin, Sobagomba, and Chambagomna, Conto Shidogure, Tingizin Gomna, Naming Shidogure, Lasova. The Kunzogi Namil Denidin, Numong Shidogura, Pero China, something done with Tingizin Tomna, then it to be Numong Shidogura. The Kongi Numong the Mundi Grumar, Shidogre, Pangdogre. In a 7 pound, Mungur Pangara. The Gondim to the Pangamata, 7,000 Pangamara. Chuma young, something done with in young sona, young, the Benjamin Kagiraso. But did over the Kunzuki Namela Tene, Yamon Pongsugira. He Lam Trubasara, Lam Trubasara. Tigarsana Panga the Nimboni Tadera, Tigasu. In the Panga, the one to Girdigasu, got the Panga. Nimboni want to Girdigasu, Panga de Ma Shidora. Jidam the name Nimbo the Mungudu Jinchasunena, the bird of the Nipanga de Mundi Gumare, the Bakshates Chunudora. In a 7 Pantugumara. 7 the Japanga Yamarati. The Nip Pangos the Panga the Nimbuni Tadera, Niga Kunza Bichera. Or the any Panga Pangsu di Garam Dilla did over the Lam Truba cells, Dinala Dugar, Yaminala. This one was that doing the Medemba, Pongani Gomgra. Tony Gombi Gomim de la Yandini, Namdang with Tony Gomba, Namdang Maim with Tony Gombaniera. Namdang Maim with Tony Gomdukas Yandini, young Chevaki to the Gomba, Musum Lam de Chevaniera. Did the Vajikasu that Jisi Tony Musum to Madobadu, Pongin Tadera. In the Nimbo Digi Panga Pangre, Mungir some mother, 7 Pantumara. Namshi Tony Musum to Toto Gosu Panga 7 Rangi Mugal Panga 7 Pangra. The Tony Musum to Toto Gosu Panga 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 Kurang, Yeshe to Doldogramado, any Panga Nimboni, Logani Yamare. 그래서는 빵제 녀몽 그런 거 있어라. 어디 인데니 녀몽 있어서 돌도 그래서. 이것을 들라 그래. 출발 예시에서 잘했어 그래.
From the path dispelling delusion, we then progress to the fourth of the four dharmas of Gampopa, delusion arising as wisdom, dawning as wisdom. There are many ways to explain delusion dawning as wisdom, but there are, in brief, two general ways to explain it. And they relate to the two ways for eliminating or eradicating wrongdoing. When we speak of eradicating wrongdoing, the seeds, the wrongdoing, the habits, the habitual imprints of wrongdoing can be eradicated in their active sense, and they can be eradicated down to the very seed. So this means that there are two levels, a very coarse level where there's an eradication of the active habitual tendency, and the eradication of the seed as the second kind. Looking at the first, eradicating the active form, this relates to the practice of relative bodhicitta. The various practices of relative bodhicitta are what able to pacify the active form of the kleshas. So, for example, benevolence or loving kindness, patience, these are able to pacify hostility, aggression, and anger. Renunciation or reorientation of the mind is able to pacify the fixated attachment to things. Seeing things as unpleasant, seeing their impermanence is able to overcome attachment. And we can use meditative stability to pacify distraction. So all of these methods, meditative stability, the contemplations of impermanence, of unpleasantness, reorientation of mind, patience, loving kindness, these are methods of relative bodhicitta that pacify the active forms of these various kleshas, these emotions disturbing minds, natural tranquility. So we can look, for example, at the relative bodhicitta practice of meditative stability with respect to the first level of jhana or meditative concentration, in which there's a complete pacification of desirous attachment. The active form of desirous attachment is eradicated through that meditative concentration, but the seed of the desirous attachment remains. And another way to understand this is that meditative concentration is able to suppress the desirous attachment. So it is not actively present, but it is unable to take out the seed of that desirous attachment. As soon as the meditative concentration ends, the desirous attachment rears its head again. It can become active because the seed is still present. That is what we refer to when we speak of the path dispelling delusion. There is a dispelling of the active forms of these kleshas. It dispels that delusion on an active level, a coarse level, but it's unable to get down to the very seeds. Why is that? It's because the thing that is the aim of the eradication, the desirous attachment, for example, that is to be eradicated, and its remedy are still on different levels. It's sufficient for the remedy to dispel the active form of the klesha. It can pacify what is to be eradicated, but it's not able to completely eliminate the seed. Only the active form can be pacified. And the reason is that there is a difference. The remedy and the object to be remedied are not meeting head on. They are meeting on different levels. They're askew. Nevertheless, this is one way to understand the path dispelling delusion on the level of practice. Then we can go further to the next level, the level of ultimate bodhicitta, the truth of genuine reality, shunyata in Sanskrit, emptiness. Here too, the practice of the emptiness can be understood at the level of approximate or genuine understanding of the emptiness. It's a difference as to whether our understanding of the emptiness is inferential, which is the approximate understanding of emptiness, or direct, which is the immediate understanding of emptiness, realization of emptiness. Until we have developed a comprehension of emptiness, ultimate bodhicitta, on this direct level, we're not able to have the remedy meet what is to be remedied head on. Until direct realization, the remedy meets its object askew rather than head on. That means that even when the active form of what is to be eradicated, such as the kleshas, are pacified, the seeds are not yet eliminated. In order to eliminate the seed, a direct realization of the emptiness is necessary. This is what allows the remedy to meet the object to be eradicated head on. This direct realization of emptiness directly faces the object to be eradicated. It is not a situation where these two are on parallel levels. They are coming face to face. The final confrontation of direct realization of emptiness as a remedy and the object to be eradicated. This is what completely eradicates the kleshas. This is delusion arising as wisdom.
Hola. Ini 지금 밀라레베 송지도와 지진기 거래송도 슬라나 차기야 침부 곰디수 송도 된 hillu기 땡도 된 hillu기 동니라 동니 쪼달라 된 내룩 동니 쪼달기 땡도 곰바디 쫄메샤스 곰둘송라디 심 쫄라메바 내룩 동니 쪼달기 땡도 심 베졸메바 쫄라메바 샤바디 곰바라 쫄메샤 드니 거차송 풀능 예시스 차와 이것은 풀능디 예시스 차기도 손이다 출바 바방 예시 수용에 미도 손 출바 대가랑 예시스 차기도 손 근데 예시디 출바 그런 게 내려고 해서 그러다 근데 마시는 출바에 신의 예시를 해서 시보다 마시베 개발을마도 출바디 바방 예시 현다지는 수용에 말았어 근데 방자는 연부의 시의 방자 님몽니디 뭐 지금도 도바타데마도 신이 타다바니 말이었어 tulung 예시에서 차리도 손을 대가서
The Lord Milarepa spoke about this process, saying that the meditations of Mahamudra are based on the sutra tradition, which refers to the emptiness free of fabrications. Understanding the nature of things, the emptiness free of fabrications, is the basis for the Mahamudra meditations that yield effortless meditation. This uncontrived, effortless meditation, mind not making any effort in the meditation, is what is described as deceptive appearances arising as wisdom. So when we speak of deceptive appearances, here this is a situation where the very deceptive appearances, the delusive appearances comprising samsara, themselves are arising as non-dual wisdom, gnosis, jnana in Sanskrit, Yeshe in Tibetan. It's not the case that there is an eradication of delusion and then the non-dual wisdom arises. The very delusive appearances of samsara are arising as wisdom. And the difference is one of recognizing or not recognizing emptiness directly. To the extent we do not recognize, appearances are delusive. To the extent we do, the appearances are non-dual wisdom. The deceptive appearances and non-dual wisdom are not separate. They are single in essence, different facets of the same single essence. They are not two. This is delusion arising as wisdom.
Hola, that probably is share said it in it. She gave them chick dire. That the Hajang Sabaro and that Tordichi Shishore. That young probably is share said, she gave them chick Garana. Nagi Lamla Sargore. Truba is share said. Lam Trubasel said it. Any doing him in Lachar, Taposambola, Todangani. Then Truba is share said, Nagi Namilla Charore. Tijiri goes Teni Nagi Namlin Chugin de la Gregosona, Nagi Namlin Chuela, Simki di Caberjin Gugres. Simki Caberjin, Simjingi, don't to be somebody, Simjin la Mibi Ningji did in Hagur Topchumopel. Teletene, Sangi Tugudu, Sambata Maiba, Sangi Kiwa Chigla Tugudu. I think your book. Then Calcium Tangme Sumla over the Negi Yurum Maiba. Jungna Kiwa Chik, the Majuna, the Kiwa Dun, the Majuna, Kiwa Churuk Sinchela, then Togudu, Samne, Sangi, Simjin and Yungji del Haberpel. Then Simjing in the Sangi Govan Toba the Badiang, Haberpel, and the Sangi Govan Jobotogudu, Sunday the name, some of the Shukshimbo. Kiasona, because of that top gray, some of the Sangagi Chedi. Then Sangi Tobeg top the Maimba, Sangi Gopang Jobotoyagi, top Kaverzi in Bashidi. Then is Sanga Gopang, Sangagi, then Lamla, the near Gigira. Ajid Sanga Gopang, Sanga Lamla Jueda, Simgi Kaverjin Gugures, Ninja Labor, Narleg and Laborpel. Then is each the Sangi Gopang Tobi, the near the end, Narleg and Laborpel. Simgi Kaverjin de la Dene. Then Sangagi Lamgi Keshi the Tongro. Sangagi Lam Keshi Tong, the near Kitty, near two Gramare, that Benjamin Minute to be Ganglayan, any checking Mamu Sangora. Did that the minute the Cavers in Gora. In the Million, the Sangagi Nurumimba, Sangagi Lam Nurumimba Shena, Sangagi Lam Gombe Kalwata Demba. Take a sudden or Kilu Lelo Pangre. Tangu Sangagi Lam done in your Sudani, Chang and Shangi Lolopang, Sangagi Lam done in your any to Atumu Manibeke or Sangagi Lamgi. Rangi Didenti Sangagi Lam Gombe Kalde in Bashe, Tanjuri Kiberti in Bashe, Teletini Gilu with Lelopang, or Tini, Darling Maduna Kevajama, the younger did of Tommy to Bashe, any Sishongi Lelopang, any Tetum the Master Tedra and Namjichami in Bashe, Tedra to be Sishongi Lelo and Pangne, then it's Tundi Kiberti Kitikasu. That Sangagi Lamla Chudura. Tel Tenedini, Kirim Torum in Yemen Jedura. 어디에다 기름다 소름이 내는데 제대로 가서 남도 주바살세 말고다 주바에 시스 샤르세 되리다.
So that's one way of explaining delusion arising as wisdom, specifically non-dual wisdom. It's an extremely profound process. So that's a very brief explanation to give a taste of the full process. And then there's also another way to explain delusion arising as wisdom in connection with the path of secret mantra. And the Mahayana, there is the path of sutra and mantra. And in this description, the sutra path is what coincides with the path dispelling delusion. And then delusion arising, dawning as wisdom is related to the secret mantra path. How does that work? This path is one that depends on an extraordinary level of bodhicitta. It's a mind of awakening that is amped up even beyond regular bodhicitta. It is the drive to attain the benefit of others through obtaining a Buddhahood that perceives beings with extraordinary compassion, one that is incredibly powerful. It has been made very powerful, very strong, and is seeking not only to attain Buddhahood, but to attain Buddhahood in this very life, indeed, as fast as possible. This is a mindset that seeks to engage in the Mahayana path of secret mantra that enables the attainment of Buddhahood, not only in 3, 7, 16, any number of lives, but here and now in this very life. With this extraordinary mindset that seeks to attain Buddhahood as quickly as possible, the question arises, what's the way to do that? What's the method for accomplishing Buddhahood in a single life? And the cause is the path of secret mantra. Understanding that the secret mantra path is what allows one to fulfill the aim of attaining Buddhahood in this very life. There is extraordinary urgency to seek out and accomplish that path. This is the extraordinary mindset of bodhicitta at this heightened level. It's the heightened, extraordinary bodhicitta seeking to attain Buddhahood in a single life that is the distinctive feature of the secret mantra. With that sense of urgency, just as before, we are able to consider, is it possible or not to do this? Is this attaining Buddhahood in a single lifetime actually possible? And we consider with this extraordinary mindset of bodhicitta what it takes to do so. We recognize that this priceless human existence with its full set of freedoms and resources is what enables one to serve as a fit vessel for the path of secret mantra. The more we understand this, the more we have complete confidence that we have what it takes to accomplish the secret mantra path leading to Buddhahood in a single lifetime. We have great joy and enthusiasm for that path, and that vanquishes, together with the understanding of the meaning of this priceless human existence, that vanquishes the laziness of misguided priority that keeps us busy with worldly activities rather than practicing the genuine Dharma of secret mantra in this case. That immense enthusiasm, that diligence for the secret mantra path overcomes the laziness of misguided priorities. And then together with that, understanding that we have the full set of favorable conditions and none of the unfavorable conditions for accomplishing that path, this priceless human existence with its freedoms and resources, we are able to overcome the sheepish laziness of self-doubt. And together with that, recognizing the impermanence of this life, the fragility of these freedoms and resources, we overcome procrastination. This extraordinary diligence, seeking to engage the path of secret mantra, is the basis with which we engage in the creation and completion stages of secret mantra. And that is what allows delusion to dawn as wisdom.
Hola, digida tabichushi durduji shetare. Tene da tabichushi di ni goya buji kena. Tene ngusu nyamneje matumnayang. Tabichushi de gyula kena sambe tene tumba. Kegere. Diang pe gecham sachambura. Tene tabichushi de la goya buji ke. Di kapsu dini tabi chi shi di karare lamna dini ngando kagi gi dutup gyatso yora kundu thangma dubyo kupang la peya gi lamga dire marme daksum ta dagur mache da cheba kundu dubyo kupang thumbo la peya di kanis peya lamna Koranzo ready-made dutup ready-made namne baba mare sarne ter thaya mare in lamga dine kunso yang nganso dawo dine nyomong badang le dang nyomong ba chingwa gudeng kansare tangbo in lamga dine kunso tanda dubyo kopang thumbo la fere sangyo kopang thawre din da kunso sangyo kopang thawre lamga dire dila tena dine di hagona di deva de hagona tumo mai be deva kigiro yana keje senda sena juju marba mila chegel dabul hajila subaka gi duptup thangwa gi namthar dire di dila deva kina kagyu gomala deva yang dava kigire
That completes a brief explanation of the 4 dharmas of Gampopa. And it's really important to have a good understanding of these 4 dharmas. Even when we're not able to completely put this into practice, to take this into our experience directly, then it's still valuable, extremely valuable, to have a longing to develop this understanding of the 4 dharmas in our mind stream, to have an active understanding of that 4 dharmas in the mind stream is very valuable, very important in and of itself. Why is that? Because when you consider all of the accomplished masters, the siddhas of the Kagyu lineage, all of them have traveled this path to their accomplishment. Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa, and on down, all of the Lamas and Mahasiddhas of the Kagyu lineage have accomplished Buddhahood in this way. There is no ready-made way to attain this accomplishment. It will not fall down upon us from the sky. It will not pop up from the earth. It doesn't just happen. It's a path that develops as just described. In this way, going from a being dominated by kleshas, step by step through these descriptions of the degrees of spiritual maturity, we rely on the path to attain the level of Buddhahood. That is how they traveled to attain Buddhahood, and that is how we can do so. Understanding this in a very complete way. This understanding that is accurate is very important because it gives a very extraordinary kind of faith, of confidence. In other words, understanding this 4 dharmas of Gampopa is recognizing that they are describing the spiritual lives, the biographies of Marpa, Milarepa, Dakpopa, all of the Kagyu lineage gurus, all of them are Hasidas. It is the way to develop the longing to accomplish this very path and walk in the footsteps of the Kagyu gurus.
Any Tagu Chishira Goyagoke, in Tagu Chishi, the Kagyu Goma Tama, to be go home Tumbola Peg, Lam Yangaba Himbala Hisheke, Tikasutini, did away Lam the Marangi young Gula Kate to Gogre, Tugre, Niga Ishike. Kagyu Goma to so ready made Mara. In Tagu Chishi Latina to the Chara. Tambungan to the Nemo Chimagidera. This is because in Nanang did a chassis, Dira, Tanda. Kagi Taguchi Latena, Nanang to go on Tomola, Rotugre, Dira, or the Gogre, Rotugre, the any Nada and Simjin Tamji, Taguchi, Kena, Sunday, Danger Gate. Kiwaji, some Tamjasum. The danger than Damjaki go the case Murder. The Kiana, Tini, Maransa Giva Gare, Drumnayan, Giva di Gurumo, Giva Dilatene, Nadan Simjin Tamja, Dazo Simjin Tamja, Lo Chusu door a Gurji, Chulam the door a Gurji, Lam Trubasa Gurji, Truba Ishis Chow Gurji, Malamda. Young, any Lama than Give Tawa and give Lama Namla. Give Lama Nam get in Nam Jesude. Tene Sundebje Narangi, Dumbaki, Damjason Nancy, Taguchi, Gula Kegi, Dumbaki, Damjason Nancy. Tene K Tuber Chilam Noronang. Kagu Gomanola, Mugi, Tijibugone, any Dazzle Jatum Jalochus to do a jingle of the soul. Chue lam the door jingle of the soul, lam truba so jingle of the soul, truba is a jingle of the soul. Sundebje. The Mulam the Sundeb Nigi Judy, Dumbadan Damjedredwa. The Dumbadan Damjaki, Narangi Dumbaki, Damjazon Nasi, Gulaki, Gucci Garatan, Narangi Gavara, the Gavar Dup, the Chidungo, Chick Garatan Gucci, Sawa the Gibelaman Chilabra. The Sawa the Gibelaman Mugiti, so atap, Lochus do a jingle of the soul, Chelam the do a jingle of the Lam Truba Sawajing, Truba is a chow jingle of the soul. Then it does also some Tamjet Lagora. The Malamna young, Kibuding Chara in Gara. The does some Tam J. Lochus do a jingle of the soul, Chelam the do a jingle of the Lam Truba Sawajing of the Diro Yamlin, Taguchi, Yamlin indirect. Good in Yamlin Jera. Most Gulaki Matumna. There was a Yamlin Jena and Yamlin Pemis. Sachambora. The zero when Yamlin Jena, Kalega didn't most Gulaki Mindogra. Most in Yamlin Jetu get secret. Miji Guradi.
This understanding of the four dharmas of Gampopa is important because, on the one hand, it gives us confidence that it is the path traveled by all of the Kagyu gurus, the siddhas of the lineage. In addition to that, that confidence breeds in our own mind stream. I too can do this. It gives rise to an active sense. I must do it. I can do it. So we have both of these, the confidence that we can do this, that we must do this, and the faith in the Kagyu gurus. Based on understanding the four dharmas in this way, we develop this great faith in the siddhas of the lineage and great confidence that just like them, even though I too am under the power of karma and kleshas, I too can travel this identical path of the four dharmas and reach the level of a siddha of accomplishment that they did. In this way, we developed this urgency that seeks out this path of the four dharmas. And together with that urgency, we bring our own commitment to ourselves. I spoke at the very beginning of the great importance of developing this sense of urgency and a commitment to ourselves that accords with that urgency. Then what that does is whatever virtuous actions we engage in, anything we engage with the sense of the mindset that accomplishes virtue. We make the aspiration, by this virtue, may I and all beings have mind turned to Dharma. May the Dharma become the path. May the path dispel delusion. May delusion arise as wisdom. Together with that aspiration prayer, we dedicate the merit of all that virtue, dedicating the merit that I and all beings may fulfill these four dharmas. In this way, we start to accumulate the causes for actually accomplishing the four dharmas. Together with aspirations and dedication prayers, the urgency and personal commitment we make allow us to connect with the blessings of the root and lineage gurus. Recollecting them, knowing that their blessing is so vital, we supplicate them. Please, just as I urgently seek to accomplish the four dharmas, just as I am personally committed to it, give me the ability, the blessing to develop them in my mind stream. With one pointed devotion, we then make the supplications. Please bless me and all beings that mind may turn to Dharma. Please bless me and all beings that Dharma may become the path. Please bless me and all beings that path may dispel delusion. Please bless me and all beings that delusion may arise as wisdom. So here we see once more how the root of aspirations, dedications, and supplications is this sense of urgency and personal commitment that we make to ourselves. Out of that, we bring together one of the causes for actually accomplishing what we set out to do, namely engaging in virtuous action, with a second cause, attaining the blessings that allow that virtue to reach its complete fruition. Bringing all these together, we make the prayer. Pray grant the blessing that mind turns to Dharma. Pray grant the blessing that Dharma becomes the path. Pray grant the blessing that the path dispels delusion. Pray grant the blessing that illusion arises as wisdom. And we do this not only for ourselves, not only with the mindset of benefiting ourselves at the intermediate level of spiritual maturity, but for all beings. This is the mindset of optimal spiritual maturity. This is incredibly important. I can't say how important this is, because even when we're not yet able to completely effectuate the path, bring it actively to mind, this way of using our urgency, our personal commitment, aspiration, dedication, and supplications serves as a cause for actively engaging the path and activating the four dharmas in our mind stream. In other words, these serve as the cause that ripen us for the result.
Tadi do flows in my character, follow me in my next life. Dire dini ko kyene yinde di dini semla baksha yoro semla baksha sagre di da che dila dini yinde la gomba che yana kewa jima yan di baksha se ne dini yinde phe yore di na shin dini kyen la gomshi chbo chana kewa jima kyen rangsingi pena nga so danda hago do danda nga so khongto sa dang la so ga to sha se dang timu ngagel thado di 파마기에 라브여 말을 간솔라 개인기에 라브여 말에 수직들의 장여 말에 희는 것도 배 개봐도 랑신기 시기도디 디 거르전에는 깨왕가만 고므로 어디에 가서 Any Gombe Bashadi? Ngama Lechima Chudore. Around the same, the Gombe Jesudore. Karila Gombadi Jesudore.
So please do like this. There are various questions left, but we are out of time. I'm going to try to address the last three questions in a combined way to be able to get to them all. And looking at question number 13, it is, do flaws in my character follow me into my next life? And the Drupon Khenpo's response is, whether we speak of flaws or excellent qualities, these are habitual imprints present in mind. To the extent that we cultivate them, they become stronger and appear again in future lives. So if we cultivate, if we become habituated, if we strengthen our excellent qualities in future lives, they re-arise. And if we strengthen our flaws in future lives, they re-arise. So if we can see how that is in our own experience. Perhaps we have very strong anger, desire, pride, jealousy, whatever it may be, any number of different kleshas disturbing mind's natural tranquility. And we can see how they arise without effort, spontaneously, naturally. Nobody's giving us instructions. Nobody's training in us. We don't have to try. We don't need all these steps to know how to develop it actively in our mind stream. They just come up naturally, effortlessly. Why is that? They happens on the strength of habituation from previous lives. We have strengthened those habits in previous lives, and now they feel effortless. This is the case with anything. The previous habituation develops imprints that appear later. They become stronger and stronger the more we cultivate them. This is the case for anything we cultivate. This word cultivate, habituate, is the same word root in Tibetan as meditate. Whatever we cultivate, whatever we habituate, whatever we feed, that grows stronger.
If we engage in virtue and abandon non-virtue, will the experience of samsara naturally lead toward liberation? Diredo, the Diangarare, or the command Dua Gaman Tabudua, or the Indigo Marantu Kosumgi, Chuba Migiwa, Kiwada Migiwa Nidi, Ningarantu Nimarigi, the Kosum Gichabala, Yana Giva Yana Migiwa, the Lumade, Kanuji Yungura, or the Dillat, the Ningarantu Montodam Nilik, Yano Croa than Yang Yana. Any Montodang Nendo the Dendo Nendo the Dendogi Langdor than Croa than Yandegi Langdordi, around the Nimaregi, Lunga Yisum the Chobadilla Chegora. The Lunga Yisum the Choba Migiwa Pawadi, Nenson Pawara Lunga Yisum Gawa Dubadi, Dendo Dubara. Then I see Chibara, any Lunga Yisum Migiwa Pawadi. Crowpara. The Lunga is given to Badi, Tarvatubara. The Kondegi Langdor, any Yendo the Dendri Langdor, the Nazo Nima Regi goes from the Chibata. Chibrating the Jagore. The check in announce Lunga is with any Cholam Nima relation to Kijik relation to Tembatene, Tempat Sishin Bayo Batene, Tene Kidiki Langdor Jena, Kondegi Langdor Chagre. These Jena didn't announce the Nima Regi. Any Kijik ready, having stepped toward the liberation, it becomes our samsara becomes a stair. To climb up the liberation.
So the next question, Drupon Khenpo read out very clearly, but I'll repeat it. If we engage in virtue and abandon non-virtue, will the experiences of samsara naturally lead towards liberation? And Drupon Khenpo says, yes, that's the description that we're talking about here, just as we've been talking about before. If we recruit the three gates, body, speech, and mind, every day, every moment, to address any of the three kinds of activity, virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral, then we can use all of our experiences as a way to attain favorable rebirths, and not only favorable rebirths, but transcendence altogether, the definitive excellence of liberation and omniscience. So how that works is that samsara and nirvana is basically made up of the choices, the judgment calls we make of what to adopt and what to reject. If every day, every moment, we enlist our body, speech, and mind to avoid non-virtue, that equates to abandoning negative rebirths through body, speech, and mind. Eventually, we can also abandon samsara by extending that the scope of that activity of abandoning non-virtue. And then together with that, by accomplishing virtue, we're able as well to accomplish nirvana. So adopting virtue and abandoning non-virtue, making those choices with our body, speech, and mind every day, every moment, is the way that we are able to embrace nirvana and let go of samsara. This is how we're able to bring the practice into our everyday activities, all the things we would do anyway. When we do it with recollection, vigilance, and heedfulness, every day, every moment becomes a step towards liberation. Samsara becomes the stairway to nirvana.
Tarvara, Pegwatsi Tarva, Sangya Gopandra. The Gasatan and the Numerary, Missing Nala Luna is Kin Pang Yendin Tubadi, any Jena, Namsi Kin Kunse in the Gundisha Tarvara. That the Duachuni body didn't do Duachuni body, can liberation arises naturally, remain for a while, then slowly disappear and become a memory. Do a chini but did it all.
Not it.
That Tarbadi Rangshingi Sergre, Lagomore, in a Nancy Rangshin Koran Tabara, Rangshin Yang de Segidor, Maran the same Rangshin La Dima Yomare, Dima Loro, Dilla Saljachiam, Shavara Java Chunsemes, Dilla Rangshin Yang de La, in a Luburgi Dima Dibra. Namshi Lubur Dima the cell ne, Nimbo Lamla, the Lubur Dima cell, Lubur Dima Yonzo cell ne, Mansi Rangsi Yang the reveal Chigra completely. Telling us of Devin Dela. In a Devin Yang the Rangsin Jure, in a Dituela Rangsin Togumara, Lam Gomgora, Cousin Dima Luru Ayara. In a top son of young Namya Yamara. Kasi Nemea another than Sume come getting it in the Chibara. Then Tarbatum, Sume come to go on to a Chibara. Yangrama Kroal Lunga. Then Kroal Kyoga and I see Yandel and Kyoga. Idemido. Yandel Idem of Sagra. Or the Yande Topsana, Lord Yamba Missipper.
In this way, the mindset that urgently seeks liberation can be equated with the Mahayana mindset of the level of Buddhahood as well. It's the mindset that seeks liberation not only for oneself, but for all beings altogether. When we have that mindset, then we engage in our activities of body, speech, and mind every day, every moment, as just described, or as in the previous question, we recruit body, speech, and mind every day, every moment to diminish our flaws in our character and so forth, to strengthen the excellent qualities in our character. And that means that in the end, we liberate our very mind stream, our very consciousness itself, by strengthening its excellent qualities and removing its flaws. This also leads to the last of the three questions, which reads, can liberation arise naturally, remain for a while, then slowly disappear and become a memory? So the question is about whether liberation arises naturally. It's actually got it a little backwards. What the situation is that we are liberation naturally. We are naturally free. But this natural state of our liberation is covered over by stains. These stains, however, are superficial. They're adventitious. There is not a single bit of these stains in our nature. Our nature is free. It is liberation. But these superficial stains cover over that natural state. When they are eliminated, when they are eradicated, that natural liberation is revealed. That is the fruition called nirvana. The nirvana itself is natural to us. It's our natural state, but it does not arise naturally. Why is that? Because it does take effort to remove the superficial stains that are obscuring that naturally present nirvana. When we remove those stains, the naturally present nirvana is revealed. But once we've attained that state of nirvana, we've revealed our natural state, it does not diminish. If it were to diminish at all, then it would be the same as a formless realm, samsaric state. In other words, if we attained liberation and then it diminished, samsara would arise again. What would be the point of that? That's not how it works. That would mean that nirvana, liberation, would be untrustworthy. It would not be stable. That's not how it works. Once we attain the liberation of nirvana, it's impossible for it to ever diminish.
Rangshin Simjin Tamje Dang Tumung the Rangshin Simjin Tamje Lo Chusu Do, Chue Lamdu Do, Lamgi Tubasel, Tulba Yeshisu, Sharne, Sangegi, Bobon Tubi Chidu, any Moadang, Molamgi Samjar Nara issue.
The two remaining questions are very detailed, and it would take a lot to explain them. And our time is past at this point, so we'll stop there for now. Now, please gather together all of the virtuous fruits we have engendered through this practice of listening, contemplating, and meditating on the four dharmas of Gampopa, and dedicate them to ourselves and to all beings in a similar situation, that we and all beings may have our minds turned to Dharma. May the Dharma become our path. May our path dispel delusion, and may delusion arise as wisdom. And in order to attain the level of Buddhahood, please make the aspiration and dedication prayers that this will happen.
Kimbala, the Ngoa Damalam, Data, Jigiribi.
I think they're offering katas.
On behalf of Jongwa Kondola Prang and the Rigby Dorji Institute, we thank all the translators of the first Rigby Dorji online series. Lama Yeshe for the English and Chamso Dorje for the Chinese, Margarita Mora and Eliza Maria Cannon for the English, and the Sean Sebastian Turkey for the French. And we wish to thank the webinar assistant, winner, and Ajarya Shuin Gurme, and the recording assistant, CK Gon, and Alfonso Alonso, Patricia Freud, Emmanuel, Richard Molin, and Rigby Dorje Center, Montreal team. And also our heartfelt appreciation of Tuben Khenpo Lodro Namgyal, our gratitude to Dorje Lopen, Omzela, and Sangha, and our technician Acharya Kunsang Dorje. And most of all, our deepest gratitude to Lama Yeshe and Lama Soba for getting the online series started and leading the discussion groups that carry on the tradition of study at the Rigby Dorje Institute in Pulahari Monastery. Thank you, Lama Soba, and thank you, Lama Yeshe. We hope that the teachings on the four Dharmas of Gampopa have benefited all. We take this occasion to announce the next series of teachings by Ven Khenpo Lodro Namgyal on calling the Guru from afar, from April 25th to April 23rd, 25th to April 30th. And this is a special occasion, special teaching on the occasion of 30th Parinirvana anniversary of the Guru, the third Jamgon Kongro Rinpoche,
on April 26, 2022. Once again, our appreciation to all translators and technical support team. Besides your very busy schedule, you gave priority to make the first Rigpa Dojo online series available to everyone. Thank you and Sarva Mangalam.
Thank you so much, Drupon Gampopa and everyone.
Adincha Drupon Gampopa.
상마라 투지체 기교당 technician 상마라 투지체
Thank you to everyone, to the translators, to all the technicians, assistants. Thanks to all of you.
드니 님바보 상마라요 드니 투지체 시기
Mm.
투지체 시기 고갑나 투지체
Thank you for all the organizers and everyone who made the teachings of the four dharmas possible.
예 계란도 상마라 아니 쌤다 편도 중에 레와당 몰람 시기요
I hope that this brings a great benefit to all of your minds. This is my great hope and also my deep aspiration prayer.
Thank you to all the attendees and everyone that's come.